Harry's Wife, part 87.4. I now continue with the examination of the interview involving Ellen and Harry's wife. It continues with the segments that began with the anecdote about how Harry's wife used to get into her car, and we'll dive straight into what further is exchanged between the two individuals to allow you to extend your understanding of narcissism in action.
Oh, that's not your backyard.
That is not our backyard. That was at when we announced we were engaged. That was a long time ago.
Yeah. So you've been married for 3 years, but when y'all were dating, you had to really keep it quiet.
Yes.
And you got to go to a Halloween party.
We did. He came to see me in Toronto, and our friends and his cousin Eugenie, and now her husband Jack, they came as well, and the four of us snuck out in Halloween costumes to just have one fun night on the town before it was out in the world that we were a couple.
So you went with Harry to a Halloween party, and they had no idea it was the two of you?
No. It was a post-apocalypse theme, so we had all of this very bizarre costuming on, and we were able to just sort of have one final fun night out.
Now, there are people at home going, I was at that party.
Oh, right, exactly.
I'm sure. They're like, I was at the post-apocalyptic party. That
In
was
Toronto,
it. Which
yeah.
ones were they?
Yeah.
And we kept saying, this Halloween, we were like, this is your chance. You can go out. You can get dressed up and actually go out. But y'all chose to stay home this year.
We were home, and we saw you guys, which was great. But no, we wanted to do something fun for the kids, and then the kids were just not into it at all. Archie was a dinosaur for maybe 5 minutes.
Not even 5 minutes.
Not even 5 minutes.
Finally, Harry talked him into putting the head on. But Lily was a skunk.
She was a little skunk.
It was so cute.
I know, like Flower from Bambi. And we just
But Lily is now teething, so you're not.
Yeah.
You didn't sleep last night. I
No.
love that you're here, but
of course.
you're not sleeping at all.
Well, she's a good sleeper, but the teeth are coming in, so, any moms will understand that, where you go, they might be the best sleeper in the world, and then the moment that that's happening, you just have so much sympathy for them. So yes, I've been up most of the night.
But that thing that when I was giving her that's a great teething thing. I'm sure everyone knows this, but when you put it in the freezer and it's cold and it's on their gums, that really soothed her.
That's great. Or old school style, you just take a washcloth and dip it in some apple juice, or right? All the moms are nodding. You go, anything to relieve that.
Tequila, anything.
Haven't tried that yet. Yep.
Halting at 4 minutes and 27 seconds, we continue with the anodyne excursion through Harry's wife's life, and we're shown the picture when they were engaged, as if we've never seen that before. So, of course, bringing up the past to assert control in the now, and it demonstrates again that this is just a PR exercise. It's all about portraying her in the best light possible. Mum, wife, bananatarian, social crusader. None of the real issues that people want to know about are being addressed in the slightest. The forgotten emails, the lies told to the court, the appearance at the Freedom Gala, and whether do you think that dress was appropriate? What do you say to the allegations of you bossing Harry around? Let's have a look at some footage where you're trying to pull him away. What about the recent tour to New York and your appearances there? And so on and so forth. None of this was ever going to get asked, and it probably never will, because the PR machine will protect Harry's wife. And there are some narcissists that deal with that head on in an attempt to directly assert control. Prince Andrew, for example, with the allegations surrounding his involvement with Epstein, and the allegations concerning the young lady that he was alleged to have coerced into having sex with him, who is now suing him. He sought to grab the bull by the horns, and it was quite simply a disastrous interview, as Emily Maitlis, a seasoned and journalist of integrity, asked him all the key questions, with no doubt rising incredulity at the evasiveness of his answers, the denials, and the absolute lack of remorse. But at least he did try and take it on, albeit he failed terribly. And that's because he doesn't operate with a facade. And of course, he, like any narcissist, thinks that he knows best. But his narcissism didn't have the savvy, as it were, to recognise that this was only going to end in disaster, and he thought that he could brazen it out. He probably walked away from it thinking, well, that went pretty well, really, because he absolutely can't see it. And you will probably know those characters that will engage in some absolute buffoonery and think that they looked really impressive, whilst they actually looked completely ridiculous. And those tend to be your upper lessers that engage in those ways. Bluff and full of bluster, think they're brilliant, and often in positions of money, influence, and have somehow achieved some success, but they believe that they're absolutely fantastic at everything they say that they do, but they're crass and embarrassing with the behaviours that they engage in. Whereas by contrast, Harry's wife, her facade-wielding nature of the narcissism that she has will allow her to listen to the PR to ensure that she doesn't engage in any direct confrontation. Not only will her PR staff say, no, don't do it, her narcissism will agree with that because her response is less confrontational. She will certainly be confrontational in a one-on-one situation. We've heard the tales, of course, of throwing tea over people, of making Kate cry, the allegations of bullying towards members of staff. But when it comes to something that would be viewed by the public at large, the facade continues to win out. And therefore her narcissism guides her to respond in a way of indirect assertion of control by basically ensuring that the world is repeatedly fed a diet of how fashionable she is, how caring she is, how bananitarian she is, how she wants to save the world, and by just ignoring her detractors and smearing them at a localised level as haters, racists, and so like. So she doesn't assert control directly to the masses, but rather deals with it indirectly or from a position of withdrawal by simply ignoring it. She knows of it. She'll be aware of the adverse comments. That's why the PR pieces keep coming, because they're a reaction to it. And as you ought to have listened to part 86.23, Never My Fault, where there's been a shift in the tactic with regard to the PR operation, which is very interesting, again, as part of trying to head off the criticism of her. But again, this whole interview, as we have seen and will see, is just one giant exercise in PR, which of course is part of facade management and the assertion of control. And we learn thereafter that they've been married for 3 years, and we're then treated to another anecdote about how, before news came out about the engagement, that Harry had come over to Toronto and went out, I think, with Princess Eugenie and Jack Broxbank, where the four friends snuck out at Halloween with some post-apocalyptic theme. Harry's wife seems to find this entirely hilarious, but nobody else does, again demonstrating the incongruity of her response because she has no emotional empathy, and talks about being one final fun night. Again, a story that has been told many times before, and this is the whole point. This exercise, as I say, is about PR, and someone sat down and said, right, we need to make her look good, we need to find somebody who is not going to cause her any problems. Ellen's on her way out. Ellen's in a downward spiral, but she can still command an audience, so let's get her on there. She's not going to cause too many problems. She'll be grateful for a high-profile guest, so that's a win-win. And she's not going to ask any difficult questions. We'll set the agenda, and what we want to get in is she's a mum, that she's fun, that Harry really enjoys being here, that she's behind paid parental leave, that bring up some interesting anecdotes from being a child to make her look like she is her. Nothing about the father, nothing about the sister, nothing about the brother, nothing about the mother. Let's all make it about her and tick lots of boxes and go through all of those things. Now, what have we got that can cater to all of those things to make her look good, make her look friendly, make her down to earth? The box of tricks doesn't have too much in it, does it? Oh, well, it doesn't matter. We'll just roll out the anecdotes that have been used previously and tell people things that they've heard many times before. And even as I've identified, some of the things that have been rolled out before are a revision of history and character trait acquisition. They weren't even her things to begin with. The box really is pretty empty in terms of what she has to offer. And that is often the case with the lower level, the lesser and the mid-range narcissist. There simply isn't anything there. But even then, there are some that will have more to talk about than she would. But the fact is that she does really nothing and has created nothing through her life means that there isn't really that much to talk about, and the things that she refers to we've heard before and aren't particularly interesting or entertaining. But that's not going to stop her. The interview then continues, where it talks about the fact that they stayed home this Halloween, fascinating, and then gets in the fact that it saw you guys, meaning Ellen and Portia, and that for some reason Archie was dressed as a dinosaur. I'm not sure what that's got to do with witches and wizards, but he didn't like it, and Lily was dressed as a skunk. And that's a lovely thing to have your daughter dressed as, and again she seems to find it amusing to relay that, which demonstrates an absence of emotional empathy. Reference then, of course, is made to the fact that Lily is teething and 5 months old. Now, there are some people who have poured scepticism on this tale, suggesting that's not the case. Well, children can teeth at an early age. Indeed, some children are actually born with their teeth. So it may well be the case that she is teething, and there we are. And it's another little anecdote that's brought up to say, look, I'm a mum, and I engage in the same issues as you do, and suggesting that she's not sleeping much. Well, she looked pretty refreshed to me, and I suspect that it's not her that's having to deal with her through the night. Probably Harry gets sent in, or the nursemaid, etc. But of course it's important to portray it as if she is a complete hands-on mum. The hands-on mum that of course disappeared over to New York for the Dealbook Summit and then was on a quasi-royal tour of New York not that long ago. That isn't to say, of course, that a mother has to be at the beck and call of the child, not at all. But if one is trying to portray oneself as doing that, there's evidence, of course, to the contrary. Don't make out that you're 24/7 hands-on when there's evidence that shows that you're not. Be balanced about it, but of course that will not occur. And there's a little exchange that talks about the fact that Ellen suggested that she helped with the teething by putting some teething ring, I think, in the freezer. And of course, then Harry's wife has to respond to that by demonstrating that it's apple juice that she had used. And she looks to the audience and some mum's nodding. So she has to pick up on that, basically to say, yes, Ellen, you made a suggestion, but now I've made a contrary suggestion that the audience are agreeing with. And it's the back and forth between the two. Nothing particularly of interest being told, and each able to assert control over the other through the back and forth that's continuing with these anecdotes.
I don't know.
That's Auntie Ellen for you.
Yep, that's right. That's why I don't have kids. You know. And Archie he seems very interested in her, but it was a weird day because they hadn't been sleeping. But is he a good big brother?
He loves being a big brother. I think it's just, everyone tells you, well, actually someone told H and I that when you have one kid, it's a hobby, and 2 children is parenting. And suddenly we realized, oh, right, everyone talks about what it's like for the second child, but no one talks about the adjustment for the first child when the second one comes along. So I think they have that moment of like, oh, this is fun. Oh, this is how it is now.
Well, he's so sweet.
He's so sweet.
All right, we're going to take a break. More with Meghan after this.
Thankfully, we get to the end of this enlightening segment, and after seeing all of that incisive observation and fascinating insight, it concludes with a little more information about the children and the fact that Archie loves being a big brother, and a little bit of conversation about the dynamic of parenting one child and then 2, which will of course be major news to everybody around the world because nobody's ever done that before. And then you'll note there's reference H and I. Doesn't deign to call him by his name, and that's the objectification. Harry is invariably called my husband, which denotes ownership, or H, which is the objectification. And that is the unconscious objectification and ownership that she exhibits over him. She, of course, through the veil of her narcissism, believes that endearing, that it's a little pet name for him. Where a narcissist uses a pet name, it's demonstrative of the fact that we regard you as an object, ours to own, possess, and do with what we choose. And that particular segment is then brought to an end, and you will notice once again that Ellen has been perfunctory in her questions, that she has maintained the own facade, and at the end the tone demonstrates that she's clearly bored with all of this questioning and is very much just going through the motions, that she doesn't find her guest interesting in the slightest, and of course it's serving with regard to her own needs for fuel control, etc., although she doesn't know that she requires them. She will, of course, recognise that this is useful PR because of the prominence of Harry's wife, and it's an opportunity to show off by saying, you know, we are friends, etc. But she doesn't know that it's for the maintenance of her own facade, and she doesn't realise that the various quips, etc., that she engages in and her questions are all about the assertion of control. And, of course, she will be feeling bored by it and will be thinking this is dull because, of course, like any narcissist, she has self-absorption herself. But her facade just about keeps intact throughout, although there are the occasional glimpses showing the sort of contempt that's clearly raging behind and the boredom that's being experienced as she has to listen to being told things about a particular individual which are neither meaningful, unique, or interesting. But we've known that all along about Harry's wife. However, Harry's wife believes that she's sharing with you all of these insights into her life that people really want to know about. But we're not getting to know, for instance, a musician who takes you through his or her creative process, how they write the songs, what they're thinking about when they create the lyrics, what their process is for protecting their voice, for instance, or where they learnt to play the drums. We're not being shown the way that the artist decides on how he would paint and what he's trying to express. We're not being given a look inside the actor's studios, the methodology. We're not being taken around the Operation HQ of some tech guru or master of manufacturing that's explaining the process and what they want to achieve and how they've gone about it, making a meaningful contribution to the world. We have a D-list actress who married into the royal family, basically telling everybody about children teeth, children keep you awake at night, children sometimes like to wear dinosaur outfits and sometimes they don't. It's neither new nor interesting, but it has to be done because of this need to nullify the threats to control which have repeatedly appeared recently and to maintain that all-important facade. In section 5, we will move on to addressing the issue of the prank, oh what larks, which was played, which provides us for particular interesting insight as to the dynamic between the two narcissists, where Ellen starts to assert control in a more malign fashion over Harry's wife, but also addresses why does Harry's wife go along with it. Join me there.